What the Mum podcast. My name is Maria Newman and I will be your host. Every mum to be knows that as soon as she becomes a mum, her world will change forever. Everyone is keen to give you advice based on their own experiences. Other mums delight in sharing their horror stories so that new mums are better prepared for what might happen. The lack of sleep, feeling exhausted most of the time, living in bodies with even more wobbly bits and never having any privacy. But everyone's story is unique. Everyone's experience is personal. On this podcast, I will be sharing real stories told by mums like you and I about their experience of motherhood and how life changes when you become a mum. This podcast is about showing you that you're not alone. We may not be in the same boat, but we are experiencing a similar storm. I hope these stories will inspire you to do what you want, be who you want to be. Anything is possible if you really want it and if it is really important to you. If you want to find out more about me and who I am, check out my website, mummyinabreak.co.uk. However, for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy this podcast episode. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. During this podcast series, I will be interviewing 6 awesome women who will be sharing with us their mum story. My guest today is Kate Waterfall Hill, who is a personal and professional development coach, but she's also a mum who is navigating supporting her children in the best way. Thanks, Kate, for joining me today.
You're very welcome. Lovely to be here.
So, I know you, but our audience may not. First of all, tell us a bit about yourself so that they can get a sense of Kate, the individual.
Well, Kate, the individual, is the youngest of 4 children. That's probably the first thing. Sadly, both my parents are no longer with us, so I guess I'm an orphan. Are you called an orphan when you're grown up? I don't know.
That's a good question.
Yeah. I'm married to my husband, have been for 20 odd years, and we've got 2 children who are 19 and 17. And I have no outside interests other than my family and my work. I have no hobbies. I don't do gardening. I don't potter. I don't have anything creative in my life at all other than making TikToks. And my business is my thing. It's what I've always been like that. 30 years in small businesses. Yeah.
So here is the most important question of today. Did you always want to be a mum?
Yes, I can tell you the pivotal time that made me go, this is it. As I said, I'm the youngest of 4. I've got a sister, 2 brothers and me, and my eldest brother had a baby girl. She's now 38. So however long ago, well, that was 38 years ago, how old I was at the time, probably 14 or something like that. And I remember seeing her for the first time and just thinking that's amazing. And that was it. I didn't even really think about it. It just was, that's what I want to do.
Oh, wow. I love the fact that there is that moment and it's as if, did a light bulb go off?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, absolutely. She was a charming, especially as a toddler. She was just the most charming little perfect little, and she's still charming and perfect now, and she's little. And we do have a really good relationship, which I'm really pleased about. And she's got 2 children of her own, so I'm a great aunt 4 times over now. So yeah.
So when I ask you this next question, looking back on your mothering story, and we will go into your mothering story in a second, was it a good thing that she was such a lovely baby and toddler, etc., before you became a mum, or did she set you up for the journey that you weren't going to have?
Oh, I see what you mean. I suppose by the time I actually did have children, because I had our first child when I was 34. So by the time I was pregnant, my friends of mine had children. So I sort of knew of the reality a little bit more. So, my brother and his wife had been in the Channel Islands having their baby. So I only saw her, when she was being perfect and sweet with little bows in her hair and stuff. So, but I didn't go into motherhood blindly thinking it was going to be that perfect. I did know it was going to be quite hard. Don't think I maybe knew quite how hard the baby bit was going to be. I wasn't terribly good at that bit, I must say. Yeah.
I think there are different points of motherhood that will like more than others. Because although I loved my children as babies, then I didn't find them that interesting as babies. They get more interesting as they grow and they change, and you can properly like interact with them, as opposed to right at the beginning where it just was a case of feeding, pooping and sleeping. Or that's just how it felt in those early stages.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember thinking before I had children, how can they take up so much time? You know, you hear from other people that and I just sort of thought, well, it's obviously when the baby sleeps, then you sleep, and then, you know, you make a bottle, or you do some expressing or whatever you do, and you change a nappy. How hard can it be? But somehow time just disappears, isn't it? And you just don't have any time to do anything else other than babies. And leaving the house, you know, takes 2 hours to pack a bag, and, you know, and I've got to remember this and that and everything else. And yeah, and I remember the first time leaving the house without the baby for some reason, and just being able to pick up some keys and a handbag and leave. And I was, oh my goodness, this is weird.
It's a revelation in itself, isn't it? When you don't have to think, okay, then I've got a list of things I need to make sure I take with me, because I've got a small child and any event could happen, and I need to be ready for any event to happen.
Yes, exactly. Change of clothes for them, for me, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So let's rewind a bit, and can you tell us your mum's story? Because you've always been career driven, and obviously there's that juggle of being a mum and still having a career. And your story in particular, I think, is really interesting on how you managed that juggle. So
I was really lucky. I mean, I suppose, you know, the good fortune is that I married my husband, who's a self-employed builder, and he was open to being, you know, to co-parenting very much equally. So I was able to go back to work part-time, and he worked part-time, and we sort of did a tag team in the middle. So I think I had 5 months off, I think, with my first baby, and only 3, I think, with the second one. And I worked very close to home. We didn't do working from home in those days because there wasn't the facility to do that. So I had to go to the office. And literally sort of, you know, handed over the baby. They've just had a change, or they need a bottle, you know, whatever it was. And then, you know, we went the other way, and then we met up again in the evening. So yeah, it was we were both really lucky that we both could do it. You know, we had the facilities both to work part-time, but also that we both wanted to, you know, because I imagine there were some people who wouldn't. And in fact, not long ago, we were talking as a family over dinner one night, and my husband's called Alan, and Alan said, I do recognise how lucky I am to have been in both your lives talking to the kids as much as I have. And I know lots of dads don't get that. But we know we are really, really, you know, it's a really nice unit. I mean, we have our ups and downs like every family does, but it's, you know, for pretty good. Yeah.
So you were career driven. Was it you that you became a managing director by the age of 29? Did I remember that correctly?
You did.
And then there's the juggle of obviously having the baby, looking after your baby, and then going back to work and managing the maternity paternity leave between you, and then having your second child. And I just can't imagine going back after 3 months, only because obviously your body is still, if not anything, is still recovering from what it's been through. So how did you find that, going back and, you know, your body going, I'm going to say going back to normal. I know that's a rubbish word, but
yeah, no,
words escape me.
Yeah. Don't worry. We're all there. I worked in a marketing agency. I was managing director of a marketing agency. So there were lots and lots of young men and lots of young women, and it was quite vibrant and cool. And, you know, we were working with Virgin and Vodafone and Eon and, you know, big brands. And so it was all quite buzzy. So I did generally feel a little bit mumsy, I have to say, going back. And I remember sort of trying on clothes and not being able to fit into stuff, and just sort of feeling a bit about that. And so I had our second child was born in 2005, and then by 2007 I decided to go on my own and do my own thing, and then I could wear whatever I wanted. Have a bit more choice. But it wasn't an easy transition, but it was what we chose, and actually I wouldn't change it now looking back. And yeah, it was yeah, I think it was the right decision for us, and it worked well for us. I think if I'd stayed at home, I might have I don't know, I might have found it quite challenging. I think staying at home, I remember my husband used to play golf in those days, and he would sort of go off for the day on a Saturday or a Sunday, and I'd be like, oh my God, I've got all day on my own with these two things. So yeah, I wasn't a natural parent or natural mum to two young children, so I needed that half and half of working.
So how did you manage your successful career and you're a working mum? What kept you going so that you could focus on your work but also be there for your children?
I mean, I am super organized. I mean, I'm not super tidy. Don't look at you can't see beyond the camera, but this is just chaos. But I know where everything is. Yeah, I respond very quickly to things. I do things, when they need doing. So I suppose that's one benefit. And yeah, I think maybe just the passion for it and the love of it. If I'd hated my job, I just don't think I could have done it. But I did genuinely enjoy it, and it was exciting and invigorating, and it gave me, what I was missing, I suppose, from family life. And at the same time, I could switch back into, literally, I was 5 minutes away from the office. I got back home, and it was back into mum mode. And in those days, I didn't have. I mean, we did have emails, obviously, but we didn't have that always on thing that we do now. I do think that there's something to be said for not having the phone on, and I'm rubbish at it. I have the phone on all the time, and I sort of say to the kids, no phones at the tables, and then they go, I think you're fine. You've got your phone at the table. Put it away. So yeah, I think there is a certain amount of 2000, as I say, mid 2000s. We didn't have quite the pull of working 20-hour days that people seem to have to do now.
So it was easier, like you said, to switch off, or compartmentalize the different times of the day. I'm working mum now, or I'm mum now.
Yes, yeah, there were very clear boundaries. If I wasn't in the office, they just had to wait till the beauty of how I worked as well, because it was so close by, was I worked every day, so they didn't feel like, oh gosh, it's Thursday lunchtime, Kate's gone home, oh no, we're not going to see her till Tuesday. No, we'll see her tomorrow. So nobody had to wait too long to get a decision made or get my attention.
That was the consistency that was always there for them. And like you said, something that was obviously not very common then, but is more and more common now, is sharing the maternity paternity leave with your husband. How did you make that work? And I'm going to bring up something that you did tell me, which is you were still breastfeeding your babies, but you're going back to work. So can you share some of the more creative things you might have to do, because you still had the babies although you were working?
Yeah. So in those days, I don't think, well, my husband's self-employed, so he didn't have any paternity leave. So that was just the choice we made, that he would just work part-time. We were really lucky. We had some local people who wanted his building skills, and they were happy for him to work 4 half days a week. So, it did really just fall into place. It was very serendipitous. And in terms of the breastfeeding, that was, I was going to say entertaining, but it wasn't. It was awful. It was absolutely awful. I was expressing at work, and we had a little sort of small office with a sort of panel of glass in the door, so I had to sort of block it up with pieces of paper and say, do not come in, Kate expressing milk. And you could sort of hear the sort of footsteps of the sort of 27-year-old man looking for either me or the chairman, because we shared an office. And then you could see him stop in his tracks. You could almost hear the cogs reading this sign, and then this sort of, oh God, this horrendous reaction to, expressing milk. And then there's these awful noises going on, of the machine behind the door. And then worse still, obviously, was I had to put have it in a bottle and put it in the fridge. So that caused much hilarity about threatening to put my milk in other people's coffee.
Oh, bless you. I remember I briefly expressed with my daughter, because I had this ideal image that I would express so that my husband could also feed my daughter.
Yeah.
And well, my daughter was having none of it, and I didn't really bother for my son, because I thought, well, why try something if I know it's not going to work? But it's not the most comfortable thing, is it? When you come to
soul-destroying when you do it for half an hour and you get like an ounce of milk, and you think, oh my goodness, what's the point of this?
Yeah. And also, I think you sort of think if you can only express a small amount in what feels like a long amount of time, it starts you doubting whether your baby is taking enough from you. But obviously, they're a bit more efficient than a machine, aren't they?
They are, yeah. Your boobs definitely know that that's a proper human being that deserves the milk rather than an artificial one. Yeah.
So you've said how your children are now adults. How has being a mum changed over their lifetime? Tell us some of the highs, some of the more challenging moments.
Yes. So we've got a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old. 19-year-old has always been quite sort of emotional and just sort of very, very into the things that they're into. So they're passionate about reading. When you know who as a parent complains about their child reading, amazing, but sort of fanatical about the people in the characters in the books. And it turned out during I think it was during COVID actually, that I recognized that this sort of teenager, this sort of 16-year-old, wasn't growing out of the tantrums and the over obsession with fictional characters, and it started me questioning whether or not there was some neurodiversity there. So I spoke to the GP, and she was absolutely brilliant. Or this was, must have been during COVID because it was all over the phone, and she asked me some really, really good questions. Went on for quite some time, and she said, there were some indicators there for autism, let's get an assessment. Took ages through CAMS. They're totally overworked and have huge long waiting lists, but we were just patient because Cam, our eldest, is was getting on okay. It was just the sort of is this a personality quirk, or is there something more to it? And we were banging heads a little bit, with the behaviour. So sort of not reading the room, walking into a room and just talking instead of recognizing that two other people were talking. Or if I was crying, when my I think it was when my mother died, I was crying and Cam just started cracking jokes, and I was like, no, that's not appropriate. And speaking to them afterwards, they said, oh, I thought maybe if I lightened the mood, that would be the right thing to do. Anyway, the upshot was eventually got a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, and actually it's been the key that's unlocked us as a family. I was worried in the process of getting a diagnosis that Cam might find it a convenient label to excuse bad behaviour, or that might be a label that they'd sort of live down to, if you know what I mean. But actually, it's been completely the opposite. It's been it's a great, and then they went off to university. So they got the diagnosis when they were 18, just about the same time as A levels, and then went off to university in the following October. And so going to university, they were able to say, hello, I'm Cam and I'm autistic. They wear a lanyard with the sunflowers on. They wear noise cancelling headphones if they're going to be in a busy place that they find it too noisy. And everyone is absolutely brilliant because everyone gets, it's a shorthand to saying, Cam stims, does this sort of tics quite a bit, has verbal tics and whatever those are. Manual tics, physical tics. That's it. And people just get it. They go, oh, you're autistic, fine, okay. So it's actually been a great awakening. And then when they walk into a room and look like they're going to interrupt a conversation that's already going on, rather than me saying, just read the room, why can't you work it out that we're having a conversation, I now just go, and Cam says, oh, right, okay, I know now that that's not acceptable. They don't necessarily sort of get it for themselves, but then once they've been given the instruction, no, you need to wait, that's fine. So that's been an interesting bit of our journey. And then the other bit of our journey is that, or rather not ours, Cam's journey, is that we always knew since they were about 14 that they were gay, or they called it queer, which is their terminology. Don't really know what it means. I think it just means they don't want to be defined. And then right at the beginning of lockdown, came out as non-binary, so changed their name from Laura to Cameron, and have been living as non-binary ever since.
So there's lots there that I think that I would like to talk with you. First of all, one of the things that you said, which was really interesting and reminded me of a conversation that I've had with another mum on a slightly different subject, is the whole thing about having a label that then potentially acts as an excuse to live down. How did that naturally not happen? Because, you know, we, all of us in society, we could go, oh, well, you know, the reason why that happens is because of I'm this or I'm that. And we could easily use it as an excuse for why we can't do something or we're not good at something, rather than going, okay, then, so this is what it is, but I'm not going to let that stop me. For you and the family and Cam, did it naturally not hold Cam back, or was it something that you had to work on together?
No, luckily for us, Cam basically just said, oh, this is great. I know now I'm not weird. It explains why I found it difficult to make friendships or to keep friendships. So they would make them, but then not keep them. It explains why I misread things. And it was just, it was just a sort of a guidebook to what their life, you know, and how it had been up until now and how it could be going forwards. And yeah, that, you know, we have a funny situation the other day. So we had New Year's Eve. House was a bit of a mess. My sister-in-law, who's like uber tidy, you know, one of those really, really tidy people, was coming with her boyfriend for New Year's Eve. So I said to Jess, our younger one, 17-year-old, could you tidy up your stuff, and could you get Cam to come downstairs and tidy up their stuff? Cam came downstairs, sort of stomp, 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 quite close to me, and said, why do I have to tidy up? What's the issue? Quite sort of aggressive. And I think possibly if they hadn't been autistic, if I didn't know they were autistic, I would have said, because I said so. Then we would have had the Clash of the Titans, big row. But as it was, I knew that they're just very literal. So I said, we've got Auntie Cheryl coming round. She is uber tidy and likes, who, you know, to places to be tidy. I'd like to show her the respect of making our house tidy so she feels welcome and comfortable. Cam literally was, good, okay, thanks for the reply. That makes sense. We're going and tidied up. So you know, that sort of, that way of literal communication has actually opened up things up for us, and it meant that we just don't clash like we used to at all. And part of it's growing up as well, and just sort of understanding how the world works and understanding how to be, you know, how to sort of behave in an acceptable way that for society. But I think a fair bit of it is that sort of understanding the communication piece.
So would it be fair to say that because Cam has had that diagnosis, now it means that you've been able to develop a way of communicating, you've got tools that you can use to actually help Cam have an easier life so that they can function without feeling like there are limitations and restrictions on them?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly it. Yeah. And they'll say things like, so we'll be sitting having dinner, and I'll say something sarcastic, but with a straight face. And Cam will go, I'm not sure. Are you joking? Because your face isn't telling me whether you are or not. But I think pre-diagnosis, it just would have been an argument, because Cam wouldn't have got the joke, thought I was being serious, and would have overreacted. And then I would have said, I was just joking. And then we end up having this clash. Whereas now it's a shorthand to be able to navigate the emotions that are, you know, that just don't get triggered as they used to. Yeah.
Now, whilst we've been talking about Cam, I've been very aware that I am using the correct pronouns, like I think all of us when we're now in a situation where we're talking about non-binary people. Can you educate me and everybody else on how do you navigate through that? Because one of the things that I am super aware of and super conscious of is using the wrong pronoun and then upsetting the person who I'm talking to or talking about, but not it being an accident, and then someone saying, oh, but you should know, and then go, well, hang on, this is a new environment for me, I'm still practicing.
Yeah. I mean, certainly Cam is pretty tolerant. You know, people get it wrong, they get it wrong, and they just shrug it off. And I get it wrong a lot. I don't get the name change wrong. I can't think of a time in the last 6 to 12 months that I've called them the wrong name, which is good. So I think that is genuinely programmed in me. If I'm really honest, I think if I didn't have a non-binary child, I would not get it. I would probably be slightly sort of cynical about it, and a bit judgy and a bit like, come on, you're either born a man or you're born a woman, get over yourself. But now I know somebody and I love somebody who is non-binary, it's opened my eyes to it. And basically, you know, all I can talk about is is Cam, you know, and this isn't the same for everybody by any means, but certainly our journey as parents has been, we love our child. And yeah, if I'm honest, they probably haven't turned out quite how I was expecting, because they were a very pretty blonde, blue-eyed sort of girly girl, and now they're a sort of gangly, teenagery sort of person. You can't, you know, sometimes you look at them and you think they look a bit teenage boyish, and sometimes they look like just a sort of geeky girl, and sometimes just nothing at all. But the fact is, I love them, and it doesn't matter to me. And it's like, you know, they haven't got any life-limiting illness. Perish the thought. And, you know, my heart goes out to people who do have children who have. And they, you know, Cam is a happy, generally, you know, happy person. And Laura wasn't. Laura was very, very unhappy. And we had lots of very, very difficult times with mental health issues and with self-harming. And we had you know, incident with, you know, with the police, and, you know, all sorts of dramas. And now Cam's at university in the second year at Oxford, studying psychology and philosophy, and has a lovely little group of friends, a lovely girlfriend, and they are living their best lives. And so why would I choose that? Yeah, you know, I would choose, you know, and I think we often say, oh, I just want my children to be happy, and that's actually quite a demand for our children to say, I just want you to be happy, because, you know, they're not going to be happy all the time, you know, and actually it should be okay for them to tell you that they're not happy. And actually saying that you want them to be happy all the time is quite a pressure for them. But generally speaking, you know, as parents, we generally do say, don't we, you know, I don't care what exam results you get, I don't care whether whether you're a great sports person, whatever, all I care about is for you to be happy, and Cam is, so that's all that matters.
So having gone through the journey, considering that there'll be parents listening here who might have just started that journey, what advice would you give on being compassionate to yourself as a parent? Because we obviously beat ourselves up a lot when we don't do the right thing for our children, or we don't know. But also being compassionate towards your child who might be going through this at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I did speak to Cam before, to ask their permission to talk about our journey, because obviously it's very personal and private to them. But, you know, they understood the reason why I wanted to share it was because exactly what you're saying, you know, to help somebody maybe who's going through a similar sort of journey. And you know, we together concluded that the reason why the journey has been okay and not, you know, maybe not as awful as it might have been, is because we didn't judge, and putting judgment out the door is probably my biggest bit of advice. My mum was like it with me, you know, not that I was you know, particularly difficult, but I had, you know, awful boyfriends and things like that. You know, she never judged. She was always very welcoming to everybody, and I think that stayed with me, that, you know, unconditional love for your child, you know, should be the right thing. So to speak to your children without judgment, and if they are going through something that you don't understand, don't make it about yourself. You know, so you know, I remember when we first found out that Cam was self-harming, our reaction was, why would you do that when you have such a loving home, and you know, your parents are so lovely, and you live in this lovely house and you go to a lovely school, and how could you do that? It's not logical. That's the point. You know, mental health issues aren't rational. They are, you know, a chemical imbalance, or, you know, something else that's going on in their lives, and you don't know what it is. And especially if you shut it down by saying, why would you do that, rather than saying, okay, this self-harming is generally speaking it's just my experience, so forgive me for generalizing, but generally speaking, self-harming is a symptom of a pain from something else. So you need to open the door to express that pain and to understand that pain and where it's coming from. And it might be a moment in time, it might be as I say, a chemical thing, it might be something that needs some talking therapy with, but just some validation, just to say, I hear you. I'm not shutting it down. I'm not saying I don't, why would you do that? And letting them feel that their emotions and their behavior and their choices are valid.
Yes.
And not judging them is probably, I'm sorry, I waffled on a lot, but there's a lot to say about that particular bit.
No, that's good. The thing that I also wanted to explore was that we could be in a very judgy environment, and I'm really keen to understand what your advice would be for parents who are concerned about what everybody else thinks, because there is an external environment out there and we want to protect our children, but how do you manage the influence of the external world on on your family when you're going through this together?
Yeah, I think probably just explaining it like I have a little bit with you just now, just saying, and I have had some negative comments on stuff I put on Facebook. I posted on a public forum something about Cam, and the non-binary part of the conversation was inconsequential. I didn't need to put it in. Maybe I shouldn't have done, but it sparked a whole debate and women shouting at me for raising it, and you're born or a man or a woman, what are you talking about, type of thing. And I didn't enter into too much of the conversation other than to say, everyone's point of view is valid, but just to tell you what my point of view is. I know I love my children, and I know that when they were gendered as a girl, they were unhappy, and now they're gendered as non-binary, they're happy. That's all I know. That's all I need to know.
And I think that's sorry.
So if ever I got any negativity from somebody, a mum at school, or somebody in book club or something, I literally wouldn't even give it oxygen other than to say those things and then shut it down. And then if they want to carry on, then that's it. People can only be educated if they want to be. Yes. If people are open, if they were sort of, I'm really curious, what's this non-binary thing? How does it work? I don't really get it. Why are they them, they pronouns? That's absolutely fine. Happy to have that conversation. But when people say, well, have they got a vagina or haven't they? Come on, I'm less interested in that conversation because it's too hard. And I did say to Cam, when I got these negative things on Facebook, I said, well, what got any ideas how I should respond? And Cam said, I wouldn't bother. They've made up their minds, and that's fine.
And I think that's key though, isn't it? That's key in life, that we can choose not to take something further because actually we know whether it's going to end in a good place or not. So I think it's a good principle to live by. Understand where the conversation is going, and if you know that the individuals are not open-minded and they've made up their mind, then
that's fine.
It's fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, but let's not use up energy that's not going to be used effectively.
Absolutely. And I suppose because I started at the beginning, you sort of said, who are you? And I sort of said, I'm very much family and my business. I don't really need external validation from everywhere else. I do a lot on social media for my business, and if people don't like it, that's fine. I'm not speaking to them. I'm speaking to the people who do want to hear my message. And so yes, I've stopped worrying about what other people think a little bit. So maybe that's another piece of advice, I guess, is that I know families who say, oh, I think Jimmy might be autistic, but we're not going to get diagnosis because we don't want to, and I'm like, don't get that. Why would you care what other people think, whether your child's autistic or not? Surely better for that child to know that they are and be able to have support and be equipped, and like Cam has, to go on in life and be able to navigate it knowing who they are.
And having the freedom and the comfort and the confidence to show up as you, because it's tiring and it's stressful being someone who you're not.
Absolutely. And a lot of girls with autism get undiagnosed because they mask very well, and girls particularly tend to try to fit in with the other girls.
So
that's so I'm told anyway, is why a lot of autistic girls are very difficult at home, because they've been masking all day at school.
Oh.
And then they come home and are like, oh, okay, I don't have to mask anymore. And then that's when they sort of almost the behavior kicks off in a way. So yeah, really hard. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, Kate, for being so open and honest and sharing your expertise and experience with us. Before we wrap up this episode, I do have 2 quick questions for you. The first one is, what 3 things would you like our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think I'm going to say, love your children, love your children, love your children. Because that's it. All that matters.
You are so right. And the last question I'm going to ask you is, people will be listening to this saying, I think I need to connect with Kate, because she's a wise lady and she makes sense. Make it easy for them. How can people connect with you?
The best way is probably any social media other than Twitter. For some reason, don't do Twitter, but I enough's enough. I do everything else under the name of Kate Waterfall Hill. So I'm on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and now on TikTok, doing funny little videos about leadership. And then my website is waterfallhill.co.uk.
And Kate is amazing on TikTok, but to find out how amazing she is, you have to go and basically follow her.
Yes, indeed.
So I'd like to say thank you very much, Kate, for talking to us today, and thank you everybody for listening. Take care.
Thanks, Maria. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this podcast episode, and if you did, then of course please share it with other mums. I have lots more resources for you that will help you on your journey through life. Just visit my website to access them, which is mummyonabreak.co.uk. You can also find out details about my book, Busy. Take care and see you the next time.